Hello everyone. Let us now discuss the questions which came on international relations in GS paper 2. We talked about questions on history in the last session. In this session, I would talk about those 4 questions, and UPSC has maintained that pattern. Question number 9, question number 10, which are 10 markers, and question number 19 and 20, excuse me, which are 15 markers, right? So 4 questions in total. That format remains same. In terms of coverage, what UPSC has done this year is they have tried to cover the global politics in terms of certain important areas which are significant to India. The question arises maybe in the minds of some students as to why there was no question on West Asian crisis, but that is choice of UPSC. We cannot decide that, right? But that was also in current affairs. So what areas UPSC tried to cover? First one was Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific has been in the news since 2 decades now. Nobody can question as to why this question was asked, though the institution on which it was asked was formed in the year 2022, right? So the question is not an institution per se. It is an institution, but in the context of Indo-Pacific being in current affairs always. What are the immediate linkage? The Quad foreign ministers meeting is one important aspect that we see, which recently happened in the month of May. But apart from that, Indo-Pacific has always been in current affairs. Next question was on BRICS as an alternative to global governance as voice of global South. That is again cliched kind of question, very general question. This is expected every year, right? Because India is part of BRICS, and India has been putting in a lot of efforts to promote all those platforms which are platforms of global South. Third question, that is question number 19, was on Indian diaspora. We would talk about that, how the question is framed, and it's general. It's not about diaspora in a particular region. It's in general about Indian diaspora. That is third question. Fourth question was on BRI, China through BRI penetrating into South Asia. That was question on neighborhood, but in the form of the power politics competition between India and China, right? Let us look at each question one by one. Let's read this question carefully. So IPMDA, Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. This topic has become very important, right? Everywhere. It's not just about Indo-Pacific. It's about Indian Ocean in general, right? Pacific Ocean, and particularly the Arabian Sea, Strait of Hormuz, Mediterranean Ocean. So maritime domain awareness is an important topic these days, right? So Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness bridges gap between India's Sagar, right, vision and Quad's collective Indo-Pacific strategy. Question itself gives us a lot of hints rather as to what is to be included, right? So one by one. So this is one important point. Second is this one that connects to India's foreign policy. Third is Quad. And it is clearly been mentioned here, collective Indo-Pacific strategy. So you should immediately connect it to what? Free and open Indo-Pacific, right? And more importantly, promoting multipolarity, right? That is the vision of Quad, collective Indo-Pacific strategy. Why that word collective came in there? Because it's pretty simple, right? China is trying to hegemonize it. So no one country should hegemonize Indo-Pacific. That is the Quad's collective Indo-Pacific strategy, right? So does IPMDA is in sync with these two, and does that bridge Sagar and Quad? So that's how the question is to be interpreted. That is statement. So what is the expectation? Make a critical assessment of the statement focusing on IPMDA. Many a times students really deviate. So UPSC this time has made very clear, focus on IPMDA, right? And Quad and Sagar are to be referred to in terms of understanding how IPMDA becomes bridge between the two, between policy of India, that is Sagar, which clearly says security and growth for all in the region. So let's focus on this thing, security and growth for all first. So Sagar and IPMDA. What is IPMDA? You try to understand that first. IPMDA is an institution that ensures real-time information about maritime domain, right? Through modern technologies. It tries to give real-time information about different developments in the maritime domain to the member countries, right? So it's very important to understand this. Information is key to handle different threats. So obviously, IPMDA is about technology-enabled information sharing, technology enabled information sharing to all, and that is very important. So when you say to all, so that has to come here, right? So in a way it promotes the objective of Sagar, there's no doubt about that, right? And what it does exactly, it tries to deal with unconventional security threats. Unconventional security threats. What does that mean, right? Please understand, conventional security threats are those which are considered as threats to nation, right? And unconventional are those which are different, right? They threaten individual as such. So piracy, you can say, organized crime, the threat of illegal fishing, unreported kind of fishing. So all these things. So information about all these threats are to be shared to all. So it is about security. So that deals with this aspect. So security for all. And when you say, it also talks about illegal activities, it has a strong link with growth as well. So that is how you can explain this, the linkage between IPMDA Sagar on one hand. On the other hand, you have to talk about the Quad's objective. So open and free Indo-Pacific, right? And promoting inclusive kind of growth for all the countries, not the hegemonized kind of growth, right? So Sagar's emphasis on human security and Quad's emphasis on open, free Indo-Pacific, freedom of navigation and overflight, right? Apart from that, multipolar kind of world and multilateral governance, inclusive governance. So how that objective is promoted, right? It is promoted through IPMDA in terms of capacity building. So when you share information through latest technology, you are also building capacity of the member countries. That is very important aspect of IPMDA. So please understand, disaster management in terms of countering piracy, in terms of other threats coming out of maritime domain, this becomes very important aspect. So that is how it also talks about what? Connecting Sagar with Quad. So it becomes a bridge, right? So security aspect of Sagar and strategic aspect of Quad. That's how IPMDA seeks to bridge these two. Now, very important aspect. That means IPMDA, right, is a bit different. In what sense? Sagar seems to be a normative kind of goal, right? So through technology, it tries to convert that normative goal into what can be called as a regional public good. A response to the strategy of Quad in terms of open, free Indo-Pacific, everybody getting information, everybody's capacity being built, right? Having talked about maybe or India in terms of its foreign policy of Sagar, right? Third limitation happens to be you are talking about sharing data, and many countries believe in data sovereignty, right? Data sovereignty, and more importantly, that is one aspect of limitation. Second aspect of the third limitation is many countries lack technological abilities, capabilities to receive data, to process it. So that is another problem, right? So these are some of the limitations of IPMDA, but concluding, you can clearly say that yes, it is true that it bridges the gap between Sagar, India's foreign policy, and Quad strategy. Indeed, that is true, but there are certain limitations which must be overcome. So that's about the question number 9, which came for 10 marks, 150 words, right? Let's move to the next question. BRICS acts as a powerful counterweight, that is one key word, in global governance, right? Actively amplifying the voice and influence of global south. There are two aspects here, right? Counterweight in terms of global governance, and second, it amplifies, increases, right? Augments voice and influence of global south. What is the question? This statement: explain the role of BRICS in projecting itself as alternative to other groupings. So a few things are clubbed here. One, global governance, second, global south, and third, different groupings, right? And we have to kind of enmesh all these things into one answer, right? Let's go one by one. First of all, please understand the statement looks broadly true. The statement looks broadly true. What is the statement? Let us repeat that. BRICS acts as a powerful counterweight. There's no doubt about that. Because consistently, BRICS countries and collectively BRICS has been advocating for reforms in global governance. You talk about UNSC, you talk about World Bank, you talk about IMF. They have been talking about reforms, right? That is one aspect. Secondly, they are not just talking about reforms. They're also trying to create alternatives. So one is reforms in, I would say, global governance institutions, right? Reforms in global governance institutions. That is one aspect. Other aspect is alternative, right? Are they creating alternatives? Yes. What are the alternatives? So, for example, NDB, BRICS NDB, New Development Bank, and other one is contingent reserve arrangement. So this is about currency, contingent reserve arrangement. Can we look at these institutions as alternatives of World Bank and IMF? Kind of yes. World Bank and IMF, kind of yes, because this deals with currency problems, that is monetary issue. This deals with finance. So BRICS has been creating alternative to these groupings, right? And it has been successful to a certain extent, because in spite of all these efforts, there is dollar dependency. That brings third aspect, that is de-dollarization, right? De-dollarization, right? Again, see, we have to explain this, right? At the same time, you add the limitation as well, right? So no doubt, de-dollarization has been promoted by BRICS countries, but they are not the same plane. They're on the same page as such. China and Russia are quite aggressive about de-dollarization. India has not been that aggressive, right? That is one problem. Second, what would be the alternative currency? And because BRICS is a heterogeneous group, they cannot really come up with a consensus on a currency. And that brings another problem with the BRICS, that is consensus-based decision-making. Consensus-based decision-making. So that makes it difficult to come up with the alternative to dollar. So de-dollarization, right? Fifth. So definitely it's an important platform for Global South. It amplifies the voice of Global South. There's no doubt about that, right? There's absolutely no doubt about that, right? Number 6, it also serves the purpose of multipolarity. Right? So we are witnessing a multipolar world, increasingly becoming multipolar. What Farid Zakaria calls, decline of the West and rise of rest. That is one aspect, right? And BRICS has been contributing to that, right? And thereby that is creating pressure for reforms, right? Okay. Number 7, BRICS as a platform gives strategic autonomy, right? Strategic autonomy to member countries, right? It gives strategic autonomy to member countries, and it becomes quite beneficial for countries like India, who have got a declared foreign policy of strategic autonomy or multi-alignment, so to say. So these are all important aspects while highlighting what is being said in the statement. So no doubt, concluding, it's a powerful country, right? No doubt about that, but having some limitations. It's a powerful platform to amplify voice of Global South, but again, being a sort of heterogeneous group where sometimes consensus becomes difficult to arrive at, right? No doubt it amplifies voice, but there are certain limitations. And more importantly, in the end, you can also talk about how the weight has increased because of now BRICS plus, right? So it's expanded kind of BRICS today, and more countries have joined BRICS. So that adds more diplomatic weight to BRICS as a grouping. So that's about question number 10. Let's move to next question. That is question number 19, and it's a 15 mark. So this is about diaspora. You see, the questions on diaspora may come in terms of diaspora in a particular region somewhere in 2018 or something like that. There's a question on Indian diaspora in ASEAN countries, right? But this time, the question is on India's global diaspora, right? question is on India's global diaspora. What is the statement? The statement is Indian global diaspora acts as living bridge, as a critical economic factor and knowledge network in transforming cultural heritage into geopolitical influence and strategic leverage worldwide. These are the keywords. So first, it's a bridge, right? In what sense? As critical economic factor. One aspect is economic aspect. Second aspect is knowledge network. Indian diaspora has been skilled labor, right? And placed into higher echelons of many multinational companies. They're also part of the administration in different important countries, developed countries. They have also become heads of state, like, for example, Rishi Sunak, right? So all these things have to be taken into consideration. Knowledge network, right? Transforming the cultural heritage into geopolitical influence. So through people like, say, Kamala Harris and Rishi Sunak, which are well-known names, but there are others who are part of the higher administration, and that is where we get some keys for decision making, and that gives us geopolitical influence and strategic leverage, right? This is statement. We have to critically examine this statement. So we have to write both pros and cons, right? Pros and cons. So one by one. First of all, right? If you look at statistics by UNO, right? India has got largest diaspora in the world. That means any country whose population is living abroad, that population is largest as far as India is concerned. Over 30 million Indians are diaspora. So that gives us that global presence. So 30 million, right? Important source of foreign currency, right? So please understand, remittances is an important asset for India. India receives largest remittances in the world, not even China for that matter, right? Apart from remittances, the significance of diaspora lies, economically speaking, in number of other factors, right? Attracting FDI or investment in general, right? Then technology, right? MNCs, they have powerful position in different MNCs and they can influence policy of MNCs so that it become beneficial to India, right? And obviously, technical know-how. These two things are different, bringing technology and bringing technical know-how, right? Technological know-how, and that also connects us to knowledge network. So you talk about what? People in Silicon Valley, right? People in different MNCs, which are the most dominating MNCs in terms of technological development. So from that aspect, we need to understand they become source of knowledge, and that's why that point is mentioned here, knowledge network, right? Okay. Now let us talk about geopolitical influence and strategic leverage. As I said, many members of Indian diaspora now occupy important positions in the administration of different countries and also in political offices. And these people become very important instruments. I understand that people like Rishi Sunak are say he is British, Kamala Harris is American by citizenship, but there is some kind of link that they have with India, right? So that makes them at least positive. They're not going to take decision that is antithetical to national interest of their countries, but at least they could be very cooperative in terms of sharing benefits for both the countries. So that becomes very important aspect. So in economic statecraft, in foreign policy, in India's outreach to different countries, diaspora becomes very important instrument. Now, having talked about those positives in terms of soft power, culture, in terms of economic benefits, in terms of strategic leverage, let us talk about limitations briefly. First of all, right, the diaspora in different countries may have different political interest, which may differ from India's foreign policy. As I said short while ago, Rishi Sunak or Kamala Harris for that matter, these are a couple of examples, renowned examples. You can go with other examples as well. These may have different outlooks. So for example, let's take example of Rishi Sunak. Sunak became Prime Minister of Britain in a peculiar context. And what was that? Post-Brexit economic hardships of Britain, right? So he himself is constrained. He has to perform, right? And he'll be accountable to the people of Britain. To what extent he can think of India's benefits is something that is questionable. So he has his own strategies and a divergence may appear. So we need to understand this. So political interest of diaspora differing with the interest of India, right? Number one. Number two, another limitation is sometimes diaspora itself may become source of problem. In what sense? If the diaspora is polarized based on religion, race, language and other factors, it may sometimes harm the relations between India and other countries. The best example is Sikh presence in Canada, and some of them are pro-Khalistani. And that whole episode adversely impacted India-Canada relations, right? Third limitation is it's ultimately instrument of soft power. It cannot replace hard power. It cannot replace material capabilities which bring more benefits as compared to soft power, right? Institutional engagement, sustained diplomatic activity are more important as compared to diaspora of any country. So critical aspect. Now, let's conclude. No doubt about that. Indian global diaspora, which is huge diaspora, is a huge asset. But there are certain limitations with other institutions, institutional mechanisms, and diplomatic activities. We have to link the diaspora, and then we can reap more benefits out of it. That's how you should conclude, right? So that's question number 19. Let's move to the last question, question number 20. That is about BRI. So China's BRI has transformed South Asia from a regional space into a theater of great power competition. That is statement. Let's look at the question. Analyze the strategic implications of BRI for India's security and regional influence. So clear-cut 2 dimensions, right? So clear-cut 2 dimensions. And the context is South Asia. Okay, let's begin with this. This should not be part of beginning of the answer, but part of your understanding, right? South Asia is India's backyard. There's no doubt about that. India has been in hegemonic position ever since India became independent, right? Though whether we are hegemonic or not, that has been India's position. So we need to understand India's hegemonic position, India's central position, territorially speaking. Why am I emphasizing this? Because ultimately, BRI is about connectivity. It is about connectivity. So India lies at the heart of South Asia. Any kind of connectivity plan cannot bypass India, right? Because how would you connect, say Pakistan and Bangladesh, and Bhutan and Pakistan, Bhutan and Sri Lanka, right? Nepal and Sri Lanka. So all these things may go through India, and that connectivity could be quite impressive and quite useful, intensive, right? Now that is background to the question. What China has been doing, bypassing India, China has been building ports, maritime connectivity, and overland connectivity, and that is BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and that has challenged India's unique position in South Asia, that has allowed China to penetrate into India's backyard, right? And that has been a challenge because it becomes a security challenge, right? Considering India's relation with China, which have been quite frictional, right? So ever since that 6-2 war happened, right, there have been boundary issues and there have been standoffs, there have been incursions, right? Simmering boundary between India and China. That is one aspect. Second, our northeastern region is uniquely vulnerable to number of threats. Chinese incursions. You talk about China's claim on Arunachal, for example, that hurts India's sovereignty, right? The militancy in northeast, which can be supported covertly by China, right? So all these, and again, organized crimes and those networks and everything. The n number of security threats to India, which may get amplified because of this. The other aspect is regional influence. What has happened? Many neighboring countries of India have been arguing that India is big, India is hegemonic, India has big brotherly attitude. And whenever you are up against a powerful country and that powerful country seems to dominate, you try to balance that country by approaching to some other power. So neighboring countries of India have been doing that, and they found a ready option in the form of China, right? So China is looked at as a counterbalance to India's hegemony in South Asia. That's the aspect in regional influence. So all these things are actually bringing what? Great power competition, where in South Asia, and therefore it becomes theater of great power. That is the crux of the answer. That's the framework of answer. What you are supposed to write in terms of concrete points, first is security and encirclement of India. And it goes without saying, string of pearls, right? String of pearls strategy of China, and we are trying to counter that. That is one, security and encirclement. Second, maritime security. We talked about maritime domain awareness in the first question. Maritime security and protection of sea lines of communication. It has become very important. You can see that in the context of West Asian crisis. So across Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific, right, BRI has got formidable presence, right? So for example, Hambantota port of Sri Lanka, right? So that is one strategic challenge to India, right? And challenge to India's maritime security as well, right? Third, erosion of India's preeminent position in South Asia, and that I mentioned earlier, right? That is third aspect in terms of regional influence. Number four, China's debt trap policy. The problem with that is initially it is not visible, but now all the neighboring states of India in South Asia, right, except Bhutan, are part of BRI. They are member of BRI. So already all other countries, you say Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Myanmar for that matter, though not part of South Asia, right? Maldives, right? All the Afghanistan for that matter, all these countries are part of BRI. That means China has penetrated into South Asia. And now these countries are helpless. So though Sri Lanka now understand that its debt trap owes a lot to Chinese debt trap policy, but that has created strategic dependence on China. And now they're helpless. So one example, as far as Hambantota port is concerned, right? After that Sri Lankan crisis and India's massive help to Sri Lanka, right? India expected that Sri Lanka would reduce the influence of China in Sri Lanka. But in the immediate aftermath of the crisis and after India's help to Sri Lanka, one Chinese ship approached Hambantota. We thought that Sri Lanka would put some conditions, but the point is Hambantota had been leased out to China for 99 years and Sri Lankan government cannot do anything about it. And we alleged that Chinese ship was actually surveillance ship, whereas China said no, it was not surveillance ship, it was normal ship. And nobody can verify that. So these are the challenges, in terms of security and influence both. The Chinese influence has increased. These countries have come in the arc of China's influence, right? And our influence has receded to that extent. So that is why that debt and strategic dependence has given China unique leverage, strategic leverage, right? So China has been using connectivity as an instrument, strategic instrument, right, to enhance its influence. So that brings us to connectivity challenge, right? No doubt China has thrown connectivity challenge in front of us. We are responding through, say, Kaladar multimodal project, through development of Gwadar port, which is, Gwadar port was developed by China. Chabar port as alternative to Gwadar port, which is in trouble right now. INSTC, International North-South Transport Corridor. We had a joint venture with Japan in terms of Asia-Africa growth corridor, right? And then we also have India, Myanmar, Thailand trilateral highway. The major problem is delays and implementation issues, right? India has to overcome that. One, I would say, kind of blessing in disguise. No doubt there's a disguise. China has massively challenged us in our own backyard. One blessing in disguise is, because of BRI, India is sort of encouraged to strengthen its neighborhood policy. Reach out to the neighbors, diversify your relations, bring a different kind of approach. Chinese approach looks intimidating now, and India can go with capacity building approach, right? Considering neighboring countries as equal stakeholders. So all these things could be sort of positive to be taken out of this entire situation that has been described in the question. So let us conclude. No doubt BRI and China's policy in South Asia has internationalized the South Asian politics. There is no doubt about that. South Asian geopolitics stands internationalized. Number one, conclusion number one. Number two, infrastructure and connectivity has become an instrument, right? And India has to respond accordingly, right? Number three, right? Appropriate response would not be in terms of confrontation with China, but in terms of competitive cooperation. Competitive cooperation. So that is how you are supposed to answer this question. Let me sum up the entire discussion now. It's been more than 10 years now. I have been emphasizing one aspect. Many students expect that they should learn case studies, bilateral case studies, right? But look at all the questions this time, right? There's not a single question which can be clearly called as a question on bilateral relations, right? All the questions are in the context of regional global politics. A good understanding, sound understanding of global politics, equations, power relations is very important. And that's why we emphasize in the classroom that rather than only focusing on bilateral case studies, we should look at the whole gamut of things, right? And it's very crucial to understand such kind of questions. So you won't be able to understand the question itself. Forget about answering them if you don't know what is happening in global politics. And that is why those who are looking forward to examination next year, it's my sincere advice, build your understanding of global politics. Do not focus only on India's foreign policy. No doubt that is our core topic. India's foreign policy is a core topic, but that happens in the context of global politics. And that's why that has to be understood. All right. So all the best to all of you, and thank you so much. That's it as far as 2026 mains IR questions are concerned.